cafe breathed quietly in the early afternoon. A gentle rhythm of porcelain cups touching saucers, steam rising in lazy spirals, and soft music drifting like a memory through the warm air. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching dust motes that floated and vanished as people moved. Lena stood behind the counter, adjusting her apron with practiced care. Her posture relaxed but attentive, the kind that came from long hours of observation rather than routine alone. She noticed everything. The subtle impatience in a tapping foot, the hesitation in a customer's voice before ordering, the way certain people avoided eye contact as if it were a challenge. To most, she was invisible, just another young woman serving coffee and food, her calm smile mistaken for simplicity. When the door opened and the wealthy man stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted in a way that had nothing to do with noise. He carried himself as if the room had been waiting for him, shoulders straight, gaze sharp, confidence polished to a mirror shine. His coat was expensive without being flashy, his shoes spotless despite the wet pavement outside, his watch glinting briefly as he checked the time with an air of importance. He surveyed the cafe with mild amusement, lips curling as though he were evaluating a private collection, then chose a seat near the window, the best one, without asking. Lena approached with a menu, her steps light, her expression neutral but welcoming. She greeted him in the local language, clear and polite. He barely looked up, flipping through the menu as if searching for something to entertain him rather than nourish him. When he finally spoke, his voice was smooth and deliberate, but the words were not meant for her comfort. He switched languages effortlessly, selecting a refined foreign tongue known for its elegance and complexity, his pronunciation crisp, almost theatrical. He ordered slowly at first, then faster, layering his request with unnecessary detail and subtle modifications, watching her closely as if waiting for a crack to appear. His eyes lingered on her face, searching for confusion, embarrassment, anything that would confirm his quiet assumption that he had placed himself above her. Lena paused for a brief moment, not from misunderstanding but from recognition. She recognized the tone, the intention behind the words, the unspoken message that said, "I know something you don't, and I want you to feel it." She had encountered this before in different forms from different people, all believing intelligence announced itself with wealth or accent. She met his gaze calmly, nodded once, and began writing down the order, her pen moving steadily across the paper. The cafe around them seemed to slow, a few nearby patrons sensing the tension without fully understanding it. He leaned back in his chair, satisfied, convinced the performance was unfolding exactly as planned. When she repeated the order back in the local language, he interrupted her sharply, correcting a detail in that same foreign language, deliberately faster now, deliberately clipped, his smile thin and knowing. It was meant to be the final push, the moment where she would falter or call for help. Instead, Lena lifted her eyes and responded to him in the very language he had chosen. Her pronunciation flawless, her grammar precise, her tone calm and balanced. She didn't rush, didn't stumble, didn't soften her words to seek approval. She spoke as someone entirely at home in that language, perhaps even more so than he was, and confirmed every detail of the order with gentle authority. The effect was immediate. His smile froze, then faded, replaced by a flicker of disbelief he couldn't quite hide. He straightened slightly, as if adjusting his position might restore the control he felt slipping. Lena continued, offering a brief suggestion, still in that language, about a complimentary side that would enhance the dish, her words thoughtful rather than showy. She finished with a polite question, her voice steady, eyes clear. For a moment he said nothing. The silence stretched just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Then he nodded stiffly, murmuring his agreement. Lena smiled, not triumphantly, but professionally, and turned back toward the counter, leaving him sitting alone with the unexpected realization that his attempt at humiliation had quietly reversed itself. As she walked away, the cafe's normal sounds returned, cups clinking, chairs shifting, conversations resuming, but something invisible had shifted. Lena felt no rush of victory, only a familiar calm, the kind that came from knowing who she was regardless of how others tried to define her. Behind her, the wealthy man watched her move, his confidence unsettled, replaying the exchange in his mind, already sensing that this moment would not end the way he had imagined when he first walked in. Time flowed forward, smoothing the sharp edges of the moment but not erasing it. The cafe settled back into its gentle pulse, yet an invisible thread still connected Lena and the man by the window. She moved between tables with quiet efficiency, placing cups, clearing plates, offering small smiles, her mind focused but alert. Every so often, she felt his gaze follow her, not with the earlier amusement, but with a searching curiosity that bordered on discomfort. He tried to occupy himself with his phone, scrolling without really seeing, his thoughts circling the exchange like a puzzle he hadn't expected to solve. For years, language had been his private stage, a way to demonstrate superiority without raising his voice. It had always worked. People hesitated, apologized, deferred. But Lena had stepped onto that stage and calmly taken the spotlight without asking permission. When the kitchen bell chimed, signaling his order was ready, Lena lifted the plate with steady hands. The dish was arranged with careful artistry, steam rising, aromas layered and inviting. She approached his table, and this time his posture was different. He sat straighter, as if bracing himself, the casual arrogance replaced by something more cautious. Lena placed the plate before him and, without theatrics, began to describe the dish in the same foreign language, her words precise, fluid, and rich with cultural nuance. She spoke of the ingredients, their origins, the traditional methods used to balance flavors, even the history behind the recipe, each sentence revealing a depth of understanding that went far beyond memorized phrases. A few nearby patrons glanced over, drawn by the rhythm of her speech, though they didn't understand the words. The man listened intently, his fork paused mid-air. He nodded slowly, unsure whether to feel impressed or unsettled. When she finished, he cleared his throat and offered a brief response, noticeably restrained, then gestured for her to continue if there was anything else he should know. Lena added a small note about how the dish was best enjoyed, then stepped back politely. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. He asked, still in that language where she had learned to speak so well. The question was softer now, stripped of mockery, though pride still lingered beneath it. Lena considered him for a moment, then answered honestly. She spoke of long evenings after work, studying borrowed books with worn pages, of online lectures watched on cracked screens, of conversations with travelers who passed through the cafe and shared stories along with words. She explained how she had fallen in love with languages because they opened doors, not because they closed them. Her voice carried no bitterness, only quiet conviction. The man listened, leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on her face as if trying to reconcile her story with the assumptions he had made upon seeing her. He responded with a half-smile, commenting that it was surprising to find such refinement in a place like this, in someone like her. The words slipped out before he could fully stop them, echoing with the same unspoken hierarchy he had always believed in. Lena didn't flinch. She met his gaze and replied that refinement was often found where people bothered to look, and that curiosity mattered more than privilege. Her tone was gentle, but the message was unmistakable. Around them, the cafe hummed on, oblivious, yet the space between their table felt charged. He laughed lightly, attempting to brush off the discomfort, then changed the subject, asking her opinion about a novel written in that language, one he claimed to have read years ago. There was a pause before Lena answered. Then she shared her thoughts about themes of identity, displacement, and the quiet strength of characters who were underestimated. As she spoke, the conversation transformed. It was no longer an interrogation or a contest. It became an exchange. The man found himself listening more than speaking, his initial defensiveness giving way to genuine interest. He admitted, almost reluctantly, that he had struggled to understand parts of the book, that he had admired its reputation more than its substance. Lena smiled softly and offered her interpretation, framing it not as correction but as perspective. Time slipped by unnoticed. The food cooled on his plate, though he barely touched it, his attention fixed on her words. When another customer called for assistance, Lena excused herself and returned to the counter, leaving the man alone with thoughts he hadn't expected to confront. He stared at the dish, appetite dulled by introspection. He realized that his wealth, his education, his carefully curated image had not prepared him for this quiet dismantling of his assumptions. He ate slowly, tasting the food properly this time, noticing its balance and care, much like the conversation he had just had. From the counter, Lena observed him briefly, then looked away, focusing on her work. She felt no need to press the moment further. She had learned that lessons, like seeds, needed space to settle. As the cafe filled and emptied around them, the man remained at his table longer than necessary, finishing his meal in silence, his earlier confidence replaced by a thoughtful stillness that suggested something inside him was shifting, even if he didn't yet have the words for it. The afternoon light slowly tilted toward evening, stretching long shadows across the cafe floor and softening the edges of everything it touched. Outside, the city moved on with indifferent urgency, but inside, time seemed to slow, as if allowing space for reflection. The man sat quietly at his table, the empty plate pushed slightly aside, his fingers resting around a cooling cup of coffee. The earlier sense of superiority had drained from him, replaced by an unfamiliar heaviness that pressed gently against his chest. He watched Lena move behind the counter, her gestures unhurried, her focus steady, as if nothing remarkable had occurred. That calm unsettled him more than anger ever could have. When he finally stood and approached the counter to pay, his steps lacked their earlier confidence. He waited until the register was free, then spoke her name softly, the first time he had used it. Lena looked up, meeting his eyes without surprise. He thanked her for the meal and the service, then hesitated, searching for words that did not come easily to him. After a brief pause, he admitted that he had ordered in a foreign language earlier not out of habit, but to feel superior, to test her, and, in his own words, to humiliate her. Saying it aloud stripped the act of its polish, leaving it exposed and small. Lena listened without interruption, her expression composed, though something thoughtful flickered in her eyes. When he finished, she nodded once, acknowledging his honesty. She said that many people use knowledge as a shield or a weapon, often without realizing what they revealed about themselves in the process. Languages, she explained, were meant to connect lives, to share meaning, not to draw lines between those who belonged and those who didn't. Her words were quiet but steady, and they landed with surprising force. The man lowered his gaze, absorbing them, then looked back up with something like humility. He asked her, genuinely this time, if she believed people could unlearn that kind of arrogance. Lena smiled faintly and replied that awareness was the first step, and that listening mattered more than speaking. The simplicity of her answer unsettled him again, because it offered no grand absolution, only responsibility. He reached into his wallet and placed a generous tip on the counter, but his gesture felt different now, less transactional, more like an acknowledgement of respect. Lena accepted it with a polite nod, not measuring its value beyond what it represented. As he prepared to leave, he paused once more, asking if she had ever considered doing something beyond the cafe, perhaps teaching or translating. Lena answered honestly, saying that she did consider it, that she was saving, learning, and waiting for the right moment. Her life, she implied, was unfolding at its own pace, not limited by where she currently stood. The man nodded slowly, realizing how easily he had mistaken a chapter for the whole story. When he stepped outside, the evening air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain and asphalt. He walked a few steps, then stopped, looking back through the window. Inside, Lena had already returned to her work, speaking with a customer, smiling lightly. To anyone else, it was an ordinary scene. To him, it felt quietly transformative. He continued down the street, his thoughts echoing with her words, aware that the encounter would linger long after the taste of the meal had faded. Back in the cafe, the bell chimed again as new customers arrived, and Lena moved to greet them, her voice warm, her posture open. The world had not changed dramatically. No applause had followed, no public victory declared. Yet something meaningful had occurred all the same. One person had attempted to assert power through humiliation and had instead been offered a mirror. Another had responded not with anger, but with dignity. As the lights inside the cafe grew brighter against the darkening sky, Lena felt a quiet satisfaction, not in having proven herself, but in having remained true to who she was. She wiped the counter, adjusted a chair, and continued her shift, carrying with her the unspoken understanding that true strength did not need to announce itself. It revealed itself in calm responses, in patient listening, and in the refusal to let another person's insecurity define one's worth.